This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Rachel Iacovone in for Catherine Shen. Today, we are diving into the world of dark academia with a new novel set right here in Hartford. An Arcane Inheritance explores the fictional Ivy League, Warren University, a prestigious college with an insidious past. The story follows the ambitious, determined Ellory Morgan, a Jamaican immigrant and a first-generation college student pursuing a degree in political science. A lavish scholarship allows her to begin her college education, but soon after arriving on campus, things start to unravel. Joining us now is Kamilah Cole. She is the author of several books, including An Arcane Inheritance, which is her first adult novel. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so cool.
Well, before we get into your new book, tell us a bit about your journey. When did you first start writing?
I've been writing kind of my whole life. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and I moved to the United States when I was about 5 years old. And, I had some difficulties in school because, I spoke differently than my classmates and I had different references. I ate different foods. So at a certain point, like I'm an Aries sun. So I felt that if I couldn't speak better than everyone else, I would write better than everyone else. And then I just kind of started writing and I never stopped. And it's been, wow, 30 years now and it's still going.
So why do you think you gravitated towards fantasy in particular?
I just think that like when I was growing up, we read a lot of, historical and contemporary books in school. And I was kind of obsessed with the idea that there was magic hiding around every corner, like obsessed with the Narnia and checking the back of wardrobes and like liminal spaces between two trees. If I step through it, it'll be a portal to another world. I just really thought that looking around at the world that existed, I really thought, this can't be it. There has to be more than this. And it was in that way of like a small child wanting to go on an adventure, having seen more of the world now. I think that's the feeling that I was looking for in these fantasy books. But now I just enjoy the idea of magic and how fantasy allows us to grapple with social issues and societal ills in a way that is palatable and easier, where good can defeat evil, where you can kind of hold a mirror to certain things in a way that is easier for people to swallow, I think, than in a contemporary book.
Growing up while you were reading the genre, were you able to see yourself in it?
Not even a little bit at all.
Mhm.
I am so jealous of today's teens because they are spoiled for choice when it comes to finding themselves in a book. I mean, we still have so much, like so far to go in terms of representation. It's not one to every single identity that has ever existed, let alone when you add intersections to that. But my debut novel, So Let Them Burn, which is the first in the Divine Traders duology, it is a Jamaican Joan of Arc with dragons, and it is the second Jamaican fantasy in YA that I had ever read. But at the time that I was writing it, I couldn't find a single one, and that could obviously be on me, not looking hard enough because the books and the stories and the authors are there, but those aren't the books or stories or authors that really get pushed by mainstream publishing. So growing up, I knew my Katniss Everdeens, I knew my Bella Swans, I knew all of these like incredible, courageous, women in these worlds where they have like two boys fighting over them and they get to lead the revolution or whatever and have all of this magic stuff happen to them. But it was just not happening to people who looked like me. So when I write now, whether I'm writing for adults or teens, I'm kind of trying to contribute to this culture where like there's like I'm trying to contribute to a culture where you can walk into a bookstore and you can find someone who looks like you, where the book is not just a window into somebody else's life, but a mirror to what your life could look like if you existed in a fantasy world. There's so many authors out there doing such good work on that score right now, and I'm just honored to be among them.
Up until this point, you had written for that younger audience YA books, but this was your first dip into adult literature. So, what was it like transitioning to this genre?
It was like really hard, I think, because I mean, I've always wanted to be a like dual author and write for adults and for teens because I enjoy YA fantasy and I enjoy adult fantasy. But I think I kind of got into my own head a little bit too much with this book because if you are a woman writing any adult fantasy book, it's going to automatically be called young adult, no matter what you do. And again, I have that spiteful nature. So I was like, if I write this book perfectly, no one will say that. And then I just paralyzed myself and couldn't write the book at all. So once I let go of what I thought people's expectations of my work would be, then I was really able to kind of find the driving force, which is for me, the difference between young adult and adult novel writing is in the emotional beats. How I would deal emotionally with something at 17 is very different from how I would deal with it in my 20s. So once I kind of found that difference, it was a lot easier for me to transition to the story.
And Arcane Inheritance is also kind of in the subgenre of dark academia. And we had a discussion actually with one of our editors who was like, wait, what does that mean? What is this? So I want to give you a moment to explain to you what is dark academia. How would you explain that to someone who's maybe never heard of the genre?
I think that dark academia, first of all, you have to clarify what kind you're talking about because dark academia really started more as an aesthetic, you know? It is a fashion, it is like a lifestyle, really. It is blazers and houndstooth coats and pleated skirts and a love for classic literature and all of that stuff. Like that is one aspect of it. But the dark academia that an arcane inheritance is, and the kind of dark academia I love, is something that takes a critical eye to the idea of education because it is supposed to, in theory, be a great equalizer. You know, we all go to school, we all learn the same things, and we can build the same skills and like get the same success, but that's not quite true because, you know, you have to look at what history you're learning, what skills they have chosen to teach you, and what skills they are leaving out of your education. You have to like really think about like who gets to succeed in these spaces because, you know, I graduated with a very high GPA and the job market was I went into journalism, guys, uh, which is a job market where it's really more about the connections than it is about your GPA. So long story short, I think dark academia is something that grapples with the idea that, you know, the things that you are being educated in are specifically chosen and why and who is choosing that. And then with the idea of power, of classism, of racism, all of these things are baked into specifically the American education system. I don't want to speak for other countries that I know less about. So, yeah, my favorite kind of dark academia is something that really studies at least one or more of those deeper issues. And then you throw a blazer on it.
And then you get the cool themes, the music that
Yeah,
you just heard us lead in with.
exactly.
Well, as much as we loved your book here, speaking for all the production staff as well who joined me on this journey, we had a great excuse, though, to reach out to you and get you on our airwaves because the whole thing takes place miles from our studios, you know, right here in Hartford. So why here? Why did you choose to base this story in Connecticut and specifically, I mean, this city?
Um, First of all, I chose Connecticut because I kind of associate Connecticut with college, and I will tell you why. I went to NYU. I when I moved from Jamaica, I moved to New York. I went to NYU. I never really left New York. However, my best friend Lauren, who the book is dedicated to, she went to UConn, and so I associate Connecticut with college because you know UConn has a campus like NYU doesn't have that. It was my first taste of what a college experience was supposed to be traditionally like. So when it came time to like build my fictional college, I knew that it was going to be somewhere in Connecticut. And then it became a question of where. I have a lot of friends who live in Connecticut. It's a pretty easy Metro North train journey up to various parts of Connecticut. I chose Hartford because I really liked the location of the University of Hartford. I liked the history of Hartford, which is kind of low key recounted in the prologue of the book. I thought that, I mean, I'm sure I could have found that with any American city, but like everything was lining up so perfectly with the themes that I wanted to tell in an Arcane Inheritance. And also, I just like walking around Hartford. Like it's a really interesting like place to be. I think it's got that like college town feel, but it also is just like it's diverse. So yeah, I just it had to be Hartford, and it is because I consider Connecticut one big college state.
So let's dive more directly into the book.
Yeah.
And could you tell our listeners a bit about your central character, Ellory, that we mentioned? What inspired her?
So I read a lot of dark academia books. I read so many dark academia books. And then I read a lot more before I dove into this story because I wanted to see what specifically I thought that I could add to this like vast genre. And for me, I wasn't seeing a lot of books that specifically tackled how bizarre the American higher education system is if you weren't born in this country. It is very strange. And so I decided to make my main character a first generation immigrant, somebody who was born in Jamaica as I was born to Jamaica, who has to adjust to, a school system she doesn't understand, a history that she is really still learning even into her 20s, and, like emphasizing that outsider feel that is like so common in dark academia. It's usually somebody who's like not quite elite who breaks into some kind of elite space in like a dark, shadowy way. So with Ellery, I kind of gave her a lot of my own backstory and some of my own issues, the people pleasing, the duty. I kind of consider those issues to be the issues of any immigrant child, really. But she needed to be somebody who could really drive the story. And it is in that kind of way that we differ because I don't know about you, but if I hear that like at least 8 students of color have disappeared on my college campus, I am leaving. She stayed, she investigated. Good for her, not for me.
Speaking of the subjects that you're talking about, could we actually like have you read a short passage from the book? I know we talked about it in advance. It just really stood out to us as we were reading.
Okay, I am so ready. All her life, Ellery had tried her best to be accommodating. She was Black and she was a woman, and that intersection made her determined to be polite, decorous, unproblematic, never sassy or angry, never too sexual or too prudish, never a clown, and never a nerd. She welded herself into the mold society left open for her, and she tried not to ask for anything more. What had it gotten her? A nightmare she couldn't wake up from that had taken the one thing she hadn't realized she had to give. No more. She could not, would not accommodate this. She could not, would not accept it. She was tired of making herself small so that other people could feel larger than life. She was tired of feeling scared and powerless, especially at the hands of people scared of her power. If they wanted a problem, then she would become a problem, and she would make them regret that they had pushed her to this point.
Can you tell us a little bit about what was going through your head writing that scene?
It just felt so healing for me. A lot of what happens to Ellery in the book is inspired by, things that happened to me in college or like stories from my friends of what happened to them in college. And a lot of it is also obviously inspired by my, moving through the world as a dark-skinned Black woman, first generation immigrant. And there is something so, I was talking about this earlier about how fantasy allows you to kind of deal with societal ills in a way that, is a bit more palatable, in a way that is a little bit more bearable. I shouldn't say palatable. It's a little bit more bearable in life. There doesn't really come much call for me to slam my hands down at a desk and say, no more, but in a book, getting to write that for a character that has been, she has been tortured, she has been traumatized, she has been trying so hard and getting absolutely nowhere, but getting to write that moment where she just snaps and she is like, I am not as powerless as you are making me feel. I am powerful and you are scared of that power. Um, it just felt so, so beautiful because I feel like at heart, that section is the reason why I wrote this story. If anybody takes anything from an Arcane Inheritance, it needs to be that you're not powerless. The power that you need is inside of you, and they are so scared of you ever learning that. So yeah, getting to write that was supremely healing for me. I guess I kind of wrote what I needed to hear and what I think a lot of people need to hear right now.
I mean, it's so clear as a reader that like Ellery is determined, she's whip smart, but she also tends to be a bit obsessive about being the best. How do you think this part of her character impacted her journey?
I think it was an important part of her journey because in that perfectionist streak in her is kind of a lot of what goes into her determination, not just to solve the mystery, but to make the connections that she makes and all of that stuff. I think somebody who was a little less obsessed with being the best would have given up at several points in the story. Even Ellery herself, is like, I just want to go on a date. I just want to go to a party. I don't want to think about magic anymore. There are several points in her own journey where she kind of like backs off the central mystery, but that's not who she is. She's not a person who can leave a job half done. And I think that that is because she is obsessed with being the best. And that is because she is like fully in love with a man who is also obsessed with being the best. And when you put those two in a room together, they push each other so far along the necessary character beats that it's like you kind of can't have one without the other because they are on the same level and they know that about each other. And so, like, when you have the best and the best together, you get like a certain perfection that I really, really liked.
Yeah, you mentioned it in passing for a moment here, but for those who've not read the book yet, again, we encourage you to. There's the dark magic that Ellery keeps encountering again and again, but then there's also her status as a non-traditional student. Not only is she an immigrant, but she's also a few years older when she decides to go to school. So throughout the book, we watch Ellery reflect not just on what's happening on campus, but grapple with the pressure of being that first-generation student. So, when writing this story, how did you go about bringing those big conflicts together?
I think that, it's one of those things that like any author will tell you this, but like I didn't write those concepts. I rewrote those concepts. They were put together more harmoniously in edits with notes from my editor and with my own personal edits. I think that when I first start a draft, everyone's pretty much straightforward and moving through the beats I need them to move through. And Ellery's more layered journey came out in like several revisions. Like she is 21 and starting as a freshman. She has been at home working like multiple jobs to help care for her sick aunt. She has her parents back in Jamaica who are supposed to be sending money but are pretty unreliable on that score. Like she has a whole mess of issues. And it was because I wanted to kind of study the difference between equality and equity. In the book, she is a Godwin Scholar, which means that she was offered a scholarship that pays for her tuition. So technically, that is a form of equality. Like she has a scholarship that brought her to the same elite university as, say, her rival, Hudson Graves, who is very rich and, just paid his tuition. Equality, yay. However, she is older than everybody else. She has all of these other, like, multiple issues going on in her life, which means that even though she's at the same place, at the same starting point, she is starting further back than everybody else because she has so much else to overcome, which kind of shows you, or hopefully shows the reader, the importance of equity, which is that we are not starting on an equal place. So we need to make sure that everyone can start there and not just be like, you have the same resources. Do we have the same like access to those resources? So that's why Ellory's journey was so much more complicated and why it was important for me to kind of weave those multiple things together, that it's not just about getting into the room, it's about staying into the room and how hard that can be when you have so much going on.
There's also kind of another character in this. The story is really Warren University, as you mentioned. I mean, it's an Ivy League university with a low acceptance rate. It's got plenty of legacy students and a high intensity pressure that continues, I would say, especially in the beginning of the novel. That's where a lot of the tension really is. But then you explore the dark side of these types of institutions, not just the magic, of course. You explore the classism, the dark underbelly of the universities that are considered prestigious. Can you talk about how you went about that?
Yeah, I read a lot of nonfiction books. One I really want to highlight is called Ebony and Ivy. And it just is like kind of telling the story, because I haven't been in college in like 10 years. So I needed to know if it was still like I remembered, if certain issues had been fixed. And it turns out, or maybe this is not such a surprise because, America, but a lot of schools were founded in kind of dark ways. There are some schools that, like, for example, I found out in my research that the only reason that we pay college tuition is because they wanted to make it harder for people of color to be able to get to college. There were too many of them, with the grades to get in. So now we all pay college tuition because somebody in charge decided that they wanted to make it harder for minorities to get into college. And then I also found out that I think Brown University was the first of the Ivy Leagues to acknowledge that they were built in part with slave labor, and that happened in like the 2010s or something, so fairly recently. So there's just like a lot of dark history involved, not just in the founding of the country, but in the founding of these schools. And you can go back very far and do a lot of research and just keep getting more and more upset. But that is why I wrote Warren the way that it is. It is a beautiful, beautiful college campus with like, tree-lined lawns and beautiful quads and like these gorgeous Gothic buildings. But like that beauty comes at a cost. That tradition comes at a cost. And the tradition of it is in excluding the people who paid that cost. And that is, yeah, it's a central tenet of the story. So Warren University was specifically developed so that I could explore those tenets. I didn't want to put it on any specific and real university. I wanted a place that I could build to my own specifications to go along with the themes of the book.
From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Where We Live. I'm Rachel Iacovone, in for Catherine Shen. With us today is Kamilah Cole, author of An Arcane Inheritance. We'll continue the conversation after the break. Stay with us. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Rachel Iacovone, in for Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about the genre and aesthetic of dark academia. With us is Kamilah Cole. Her novel, An Arcane Inheritance, is set right here in Hartford, exploring a fictional Ivy League university with a shadowy past. So, Kamilah, in what ways were you hoping to break out of the traditional archetypes and characters that we typically see in dark academia?
I find that a lot of the archetypes and tropes of any story really are immediately made new and different simply by allowing people of color to embody them for the first time. I'm speaking of, I just finished this book. It's called Deadly Ever After by Brittany Johnson. It's a young adult novel about this princess who dies on her wedding day, and she discovers that to come back to life, she has to get true love's kiss. And something like that, like, oh, it's a princess, oh, true love's kiss is so different when it is a black girl, like a dark-skinned black girl getting to wear those dresses, getting to be soft, getting to be somebody's true love. That is a position that we don't really occupy a lot in, pop culture. So it just felt so inventive and so new to me on that score. So for me, with Dark Academia, I was trying to come at it as a immigrant story, as a Caribbean American story, not just a Black American story. So right from there, like the dark academia trope is that the main character is usually some sort of outsider who is, typically more poor than their wealthier, more integrated classmates. And that outsider status becomes different if you are an outsider because you weren't even born in this country in the first place. Everybody knows things that you are still catching up on. And then, for example, a secret society who is I don't want to spoil anything, but a secret society and the certain kind of victim that they are preying on in my book is a little different than the dark academia stories that I have read, where it's a little less targeted. So yeah, I think with the tropes, I was trying to come at them from a different perspective just because I feel like they are different just based on the fact of who has the honor of filling those roles in a story. But I was also trying kind of to subvert quite a few of them. Like, it has the rivals to lovers that you do see in like many dark academia novels, but Hudson and Ellory are not normal rivals and they are not normal lovers. Again, trying not to spoil things. There is a twist in their story that makes their intense relationship make a lot more sense than just, you keep doing better than me in class and I don't like that. And then there is, the kind of my school has these like magical mysteries. I kind of came at it from a way where Warren University really is a normal university. However, the magic school it used to be is something that existed and exists no longer unless you're in this secret society. So as opposed to her going to a magical school with secrets, the secret is that it was a magical school. So little things like that were my way of putting a spin on the archetypes and tropes that I think that you should have or must have in order to truly call the book a dark academia book. But for me, the story was different just from the start because I don't really see a lot of first generation Jamaican American immigrants leading, being the ultimate outsider.
Yeah, I mean, another way that this story definitely stuck out for me from the genre was the simple fact that seemingly every character in this book is queer. And it wasn't a whole thing. Like every character is presumed bi or pansexual by the end. You meet like their current or past love interests, and they're all different genders. So, also one of Ellery's main friends is non-binary. So while prejudice, like you mentioned, does come up throughout the book, homophobia and transphobia do not.
Mhm.
Was that intentional on your part?
Yes, I think that this is just something specific to me as an author, which is that kind of I escaped into fantasy to be a safe space in many ways. Yes, there's death and yes, there's like violence and all of this stuff, but like I read it to feel safe. So just for me specifically as an author, I have kind of a personal like thing where every book that I write, no matter where it's set, is queer normative. And like whatever issues my characters have, that's not going to be one of them. I think that there are incredible authors doing incredible work in that space, where they have their issues with homophobia and all of that stuff. And those stories are so important and I highly recommend them to people. But when I write a book, like that's often not the problem in my fantasy worlds as well. Like usually their skin color is not their main issue in the world. And that's just really personal to me. I don't want to deal with that. So I pretend that if I am constructing a world, and even though this is a contemporary story, like there is an element of fantasy. My fantasy is that we're all okay with that. And especially, I think it's a lot easier when your main cast is all queer because we do tend to gravitate toward each other and then, make it a safe space. So it's a little less fantastical than it seems. But yeah, that was never going to be one of their issues in this.
An experience that Ellery goes through time and time again is deja vu. What got you interested in this phenomenon?
Gosh, it happens to me a lot. Like not like that. But I have very, very, very vivid dreams. And so sometimes things will happen and I'm not sure if I dreamt them or if they happened before or whatever. I've always been fascinated by the sheer concept of deja vu, but when it came to Ellery's story, that element kind of happened last because the ending twist about her world and everything came first. And then I kind of wanted to do something that would loop her around to that twist. I'm trying so hard to avoid spoilers right now, which is how deja vu came into it. But I think yeah, it started with me having very, very, very vivid dreams that I could not figure out if they were memories or not, and landed in this story and the concept of deja vu.
When Ellery goes through it, it seems like she sometimes just brushes it off, almost denying her own experience. Do you think trying to suppress that feeling that something is not right is a common experience, especially for those under this amount of pressure?
Oh yes, definitely. It is actually crazy how often we, especially as women, I think specifically gaslight ourselves because we are taught by society that we need to be pleasant, we need to maintain the peace. Like it's a very, very, very common female experience to kind of feel that. And so like when you think about going to the doctor and you're in extreme pain and they're like, you're fine, take an ibuprofen, like those kinds of things. Like we are just taught so much to downplay or underplay or even ignore things that don't fit with like a placid reality. And I think especially with Ellery, it's like she is here on a scholarship. She is here on a place that she could very easily lose. And she has not only class, but also work study and also the worst roommate ever. So anything that distracts her from that could be a way that she is thrown out of the university. So it's almost even easier for her, not just as a woman, to ignore very obvious things that something is wrong because otherwise the alternative is that she has just one more item on an endless to-do list. And also the alternative is that what she has to believe that magic is a thing. What? So, yeah, I think it's a very common experience. And I think it is really rooted in the fact that Ellery is a woman, not just a Black woman, but just any woman, because we are gaslit so much that we start gaslighting ourselves.
When Ellery starts to accept what's happening around her and she really does believe that magic exists, things start to transform. There's a brief discussion about always wanting to believe that real magic exists. And do you think that is a universal experience as well?
I think so. I think I base that really more on there is a word for this, but it's like when you hear about something for the first time and then suddenly you're hearing that same word everywhere that you've never heard before. There is an actual term for this phenomenon, but it was just like once you accept the existence of something, you start seeing the evidence of it everywhere. So that's where that sudden transition came for. But I think the idea of there being magic in the world is something that you accept, a lot easier when you are younger, and that is harder to hold on to when you are an adult. But I think that even if it's not like wave your hand and cast a spell magic, I think that a sunrise is evidence of magic in the world. Like my sister's smile is evidence of magic in the world. There's so much beauty and like natural power in the world that we don't we have our jobs and we have our lives and we don't really pause and like look at that. But I really do believe that there is magic in the bones of this world. That's a quote from the book, guys. Um, and even if it's not the kind of magic, the kind of corrupted dark magic that Ellery is dealing with, I think that learning to rediscover that magic is an important journey that every adult should take, because I think once you lose that sense of wonder, the world is such a darker place for it.
Often romance can become the central point of kind of these fantasies that toe the line of being romantasy. And Ellery's love interests are important characters. You mentioned Hudson, of course. There's also a female love interest as well. Like I said, everyone is bi here, but they don't feel as important as her own journey. Was that intentional?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that when I was writing this book, I did not want to include a single thing that did not push Ellery further along her journey. Like, for example, the inclusion of Ty as her best friend. Ty is very wealthy. Ty is very confident, and she is established on campus in ways that Ellery is not. So she's Ellery's best friend, but she's also a look at the kind of person that Ellery wants to be. And then Ty is in a loving and committed relationship with, the non-binary Cody. And Cody and Ty, they are on each other's side. They are always together. They are deeply in love. And that is kind of a look at the stability and the kind of support that Ellery is longing for and that she feels that she lacks and that she tries to find in Liam. And then Liam, he is representative of, he's such a sweet baby, but he is representative of access, the kind of access that you can get just because someone likes you and suddenly you're in rooms that you never would have been in otherwise. And then there's Hudson, who, like I said, he's the best and he pushes her to be the best so that they can be perfect together. Everyone that exists in some way pushes. Oh yeah, and Boone, of course, there's Boone, who is he's the editor in chief of the newspaper, and he basically represents that, she's like, I'm just here because I need to solve this mystery. Oh no, I love journalism kind of journey in her arc. I did not want any relationship that she had to feel extraneous or like it was there just to be there. But I also did not want these characters to feel flat and like they didn't exist when she was around, which honestly is why sometimes when Ellery calls, the person she is calling does not answer the phone because they have lives that don't revolve around her. But yeah, everything in the book goes back to her journey in the end, because this is about her and accepting that things are allowed to be about her.
From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Where We Live. I'm Rachel Iacovone, in for Catherine Shen. We're talking about the genre and aesthetic of dark academia today with Kamilah Cole, whose book, An Arcane Inheritance, is set right here in Hartford. We'll continue the conversation after the break. Stay with us. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Rachel Iacovone, in for Catherine Shen. Today, we're popping on our blazers and heading into the stacks, exploring the genre and aesthetic of dark academia. Want to hear more book conversations? Sign up for our Where We Read newsletter, a monthly rundown of what the Where We Live team is reading, with highlights of some of the best author interviews on Connecticut Public. Listen back to interviews and find your next read at ctpublic.org/whereweread. Still with us is Kamilah Cole. Her dark academia novel, An Arcane Inheritance, is set right here in Hartford. So, Kamilah, I'm sure there are others doing similar work. They're just not finding me via the settings proximity or the USA Today's bestseller list. Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah,
But
thank you so much.
oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing this all over Instagram, which we'll get to in a second. But do you have any recommendations for our listeners of some of your peers who are fighting the good fight for representation in fantasy?
Oh my God, absolutely. So, as far as dark academia goes, one of my biggest influences was An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. She is the author of House of Hunger and The Year of the Witching. She's one of my favorite authors of all time, and her dark academia book, An Academy for Liars, um, blew my mind. It really tackles like a lot of mental health and how it affects you as you navigate a magical school. I also have, there is a book I just read recently coming up called Divine Oaths by Elizabeth Agumang, and it comes out this year. It is more of a contemporary thriller, but it is about a Black girl who has to investigate a bunch of murders on campus of a school after the school's, I think he's the headmaster's son, comes and asks her to predict how he's going to die. So there's a lot of like really cool options. I'm trying to think. Oh, yes, I have a Lethal Kiss by Taylor Groth is coming up, which is dark academia, but make it sapphic. And also one of them is a Norse vampire. Uh, and She Haunts Me Still by D. Elizabeth is also coming up. And that is, taking place at a theater university with a cursed girl whose curse goes back to the New England vampire panic, which I thought was really cool. And these are all the last two books I just named are so queer. Because those are the kinds of books that I love to read. So yeah, as far as dark academia goes, I think those are important, but I also do want to call out one of my favorite fantasies of all time, The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. It is a retelling of or it's inspired by the 1001 Nights about a girl who is forced to go into the jungle with her Jinn bodyguard desert, with her Jinn bodyguard to find a lamp or Sultan will kill her. And it is just everything I love about an original fantasy. It is a quest story. It is a found family story. It has such fascinating magic. It's based on the stories that Chelsea was told as a child. As far as fantasy and representation and the kind of love of culture goes, I think The Stardust Thief is an important addition to any shelf.
So, what's next for you? Can we expect a
Whew.
sequel for this one?
Absolutely not. An Arcane Inheritance is a standalone. That is the entire story as I wanted to tell it. But I have a young adult romantasy called Wicked Endeavors coming out this September, about a girl. It's set in a Spanish Renaissance inspired world about a girl whose country was taken over by witches. So she adopts a new identity and cons her way into their annual social season to get her revenge, but her revenge is complicated by her feelings for her stoic childhood friend and an enemy prince. And then next year, my next adult book is actually a vampire fantasy that I kind of pitch as like the Princess Diaries with vampires, because it is about a girl who attends her estranged father's funeral only to discover that he was the king of the hidden world of vampires and he has named her his heir. So those are the next two big projects coming up for me.
You're really checking all those millennial boxes with both of those plots.
Like,
My
my
last
goal, my goal as an author is always to be like, I want this book that I love, but I want Black people in it. So working on it.
That's a great goal. I mean, my last question is actually kind of related. Do you have any words of wisdom for those who are interested in dipping their toes into the world of fantasy writing, particularly those of, like you're saying, folks of color who are trying to get into this genre?
Of course, my major piece of advice is always don't self reject. No is a word that you hear very often in the publishing world, whether you are successful or not, but especially if you are a person of color. So never be your first no. Don't tell yourself that this story isn't good enough to sell. Don't tell yourself that nobody wants, this book by you or that book by you. Don't tell yourself that you can't do this. You have to believe in yourself before anybody else. And honestly, I truly believe that somewhere out there, someone needs your voice and your story, because the purpose of books is not it's not even necessarily to be good, to be totally honest with you. It is for the time that somebody spends between your pages to make them feel unalone in this world. And so I think that everybody potentially has a good story inside of them. And just please don't be the first person to tell yourself that you don't deserve to be on the shelf with all of your heroes, because you do. Like Bad Bunny said, believe in yourself, you're worth more than you think.
I, of course, again, being the Puerto Rican communities reporter here, love that we're kind of closing on some thoughts from Bad Bunny. But I do want to ask you, since I saw a lot of the marketing, of course, was through Instagram. You're a very modern author in that way. So how can people find you?
They can find me basically everywhere at Word Siren. So WordSiren, one word. I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. They can find me on my website, camilla-cole.com, or I have a newsletter, camillacole.substack.com.
How have you been using that? Because that is how I will admit this book found me. You know, I saw it through someone recommending. It must have been an advanced reader copy. And it seems to be that it found young and folks of color, queer, creators who are then sharing your work. So I should have asked that probably in the words to wisdom. But is social media a huge part of this in your marketing today?
Honestly, with social media, I think that it is a prison. I think it is very toxic. So for me personally, I only do what I find fun. And what I find fun is actually boosting other people's books. And then I tack my book on at the end because I technically have to promote myself. So social media is fun for me when I am using it to talk about books that I love and to talk about shows that I love. But otherwise, not really. I think as far as marketing goes, I think what really works for me is that I try to be as genuine as I possibly can. Like I said, I only do it if I find it fun. I have never said anything online that I would not stand by. And I think that I am blessed enough that people are responding well to that earnestness and that genuineness that I try to display across social media. But I think that as far as marketing goes, so much of it goes to my team who have been working so hard over at Source Books to like do ads and to do giveaways and all of this stuff. So yeah, I would give this one to my team. I'm just talking about Once Upon a Time for fun.
Well, you heard that. That's at Word Siren. We'll include that, of course, online for you as well, so you can see more of Kamilah Cole being a girl's girl, sharing other authors' work online. So that has been Kamilah Cole, the author of An Arcane Inheritance. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Love you guys.
I'm Rachel Iacovone. I am in right now for Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to Where We Live. I'm Tess Terrible, the senior producer for Where We Live, and I'm here with Rachel. Rachel, that was such an amazing conversation, and we want to talk about where we read because this episode, among all of our author conversations, are going to be featured on Where We Read. Tell me what you're reading right now.
Right now, I'm actually reading a graphic novel. I'm almost done with The 100 Nights of Hero, which I loved that Kamilah brought up at some point, the 1001 Nights. It's, this gigantic collection from Middle Eastern folktales that people over the years have continuously pulled from and got inspiration from. Aladdin is like a great example of that. But in The 100 Nights of Hero, this is a story that is also sapphic. For those who have not maybe heard that terminology, it's women who love women. So the dynamic is that a woman has recently married a man and they have not consummated the marriage, but his friend comes by and he's talking about how great his wife is. And he says, well, she can't be that great. You haven't gone this far with her. And I bet I can seduce her in 100 nights. And so he says, I'll stay, you leave, and the whole time you as a reader know that she is in love with and has been in a relationship with for many years her maid that entered the marriage and home with her, so she's living there. And every night he comes in to try to seduce her, and her maid tells him a story, and they kind of are so engaging that every day the dawn comes up and he's like, oh shoot, I have to wait another night, and that goes on for 100 nights. So as a reader, it's been really interesting to see how interconnected all of these stories are and look at the original folklore of it, but it's been fun.
So if you want to hear more about Rachel's recommendations and all our recommendations from the Where We Live team, make sure you subscribe to the Where We Read newsletter, and thank you so much for listening.